Good morning, everyone. We're here on January 25th, 2023 for a public hearing on the city's draft home ARP allocation plan. I'm going to share my screen and go through some slides that just provide an overview of home ARP funds, their eligible uses, and the process for allocating them. And then we'll take public questions and comments. Uh, So to begin with, just zooming out about CDA and who we are. CDA serves as a clearinghouse for a variety of federal, state, and local funds for the city of St. Louis, which we deploy to drive economic justice across the city. We don't provide direct services ourselves. We really fund a wide range of public and nonprofit partners to provide public services, to construct affordable housing. We have over 1,000 affordable housing units in the development pipeline, and the goal is really to empower, develop, and transform St. Louis. To empower St. Louis by empowering residents, by investing in workforce development and youth and small businesses and micro entrepreneurs. To develop the city by investing in our infrastructure, by investing in our streets, by investing in transit, by investing in digital equity and countless other initiatives, and to transform our city by investing in neighborhoods, investing in housing, transforming vacancy from a liability into an asset, and really investing in community-driven development, whether that be to build health clinics or grocery stores, or invest in transit or otherwise, educational, early childcare, et cetera, and of course, affordable housing, which is what we're talking about today. Again, just a little list of some CDA funded agencies and programs, generally speaking, broken up between a variety of public services, providing services to youth, seniors, unhoused, et cetera, but also affordable housing production. So we're here today to talk about HOME-ARP funds, and the city of St. Louis was awarded $10.6 million in HOME-ARP pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act. And these funds are really intended to serve four qualifying populations, and that's the unhoused, those at risk of becoming homeless, which is essentially folks under 30% AMI, extremely low income individuals, those fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, and then finally a variety of other populations that are identified as being at risk of housing instability. And these include individuals with disabilities, includes individuals with substance abuse challenges, and others. So that is essentially the intent of the funds. And I should also comment here on the eligible uses. Funds can be used to fund the construction of affordable housing and permanent supportive housing for these qualifying populations. Funds can be used to provide supportive services to these communities. Funds can be used to provide rental assistance, and they can also be used to provide operational assistance and capacity building for nonprofits, as well as to fund non-congregate shelter. So those are essentially the eligible uses. And what HUD asks us to do in order to identify and put together an allocation plan, which is what is being shared today, is they ask us to conduct a variety of consultations. And so that's what CDA has been doing actually since well before I got here in September 22. But for over a year now, has been having a variety of conversations with stakeholders. And we tried to fit in another round of engagement with the COC, with member entities, with other folks listed here on this page before we produced and published this draft allocation plan. It's worth noting that consistently across the board, the need that we hear most often is the need for affordable housing. Many of these stakeholders expressed and told stories of times when they had tried to rehouse folks and had been unable for lack of units. And so there seemed to be a pretty clear consensus, and this was also backed up in a survey that we issued, that actual housing production ought to be a priority. But we also heard from many folks, and especially from HUD, that is targeting these funds in particular to the unhoused community, folks at risk of becoming unhoused, and the various other qualifying populations, that the housing that we build with HOME-ARP funds ought to go beyond traditional affordable housing and really have wraparound supports built into it to meet the needs of these particular qualifying populations. We also had to do a needs inventory and gap analysis, and the two essential prongs of that needs inventory and gap analysis involved our point in time count that found over 1,000 unhoused individuals. And I know that we're just getting ready, or if it isn't happening right now, just getting ready to conduct another point in time count. And Yusuf Scoggin, Executive Director of the Department of Human Services, is here and may be able to answer questions pertaining to this piece of the puzzle. The other piece of our needs and gaps analysis was produced as part of the city's affordable housing strategy, which RISE has led the development of, and includes an analysis of the city's essentially rental housing stock, and finds that of the roughly 140,000 households in St. Louis, there's 77,000 of those are renter households, and of those 37,000 are cost burdened. And collectively, they pay over $100 million more in rent than they can afford each year. So this is just kind of the core problem behind so many of the challenges that we face on the extreme end of the crisis as folks become unhoused, as folks are evicted. But the core of it goes beyond just those unhoused folks, but really covers those at risk of becoming unhoused as well, which again, we have 37,000 cost burden households, and of those, the 22,000 which are under 30% AMI qualify as at risk of becoming unhoused. And again, speaks to the gap in the current housing inventory, as well as frankly to a poverty problem in the city, and the need to invest in these communities and empower folks and increase incomes. So that's essentially the needs and gap analysis, and which drove us as a result of public input to focus on permanent supportive housing, or sorry, not public input, of consultations, to focus on permanent supportive housing as the priority for this funding stream. And essentially, when we talk about permanent supportive housing, we're talking about affordable housing with wraparound supportive services attached to them. And we've seen a few models here in the city of St. Louis that are instructive, including most recently coming online Doorways 2.0, the Veterans Community Project, which is moving forward. And then we've also seen permanent supportive housing that kind of eschews the traditional model of a single site and moves forward in scattered sites. And that's something that we're interested in funding as well. And what we really want to do, we don't have a preconception about exactly the projects that we intend to fund. We're going to be issuing a NOFA once HUD approves this allocation plan. We're going to be issuing a NOFA and inviting our partners in the community, nonprofits who have experience serving these qualifying populations, to apply and put together a proposal to develop new permanent supportive housing. And what we want to do as well is we want to make these funds flexible, so that not only can they be used for construction, that's that $5.6 million figure in the budget here is what we've provisionally set aside for construction, but we also want to encourage folks to apply to us to have a supportive services endowment to their proposed project, or to provide rental assistance so that they can potentially master lease some of the units, either to themselves or to an organization with experience serving these qualifying populations, so that these units can be deployed extremely flexibly without the need for a lease between an individual and the property manager. So this is essentially where we're at in terms of starting point, but really eager to, and this will all be a single NOFA, and folks can apply in partnership with other nonprofits. And again, just kind of tell us their plan. The leverage that they're bringing to the table is obviously going to be critical. If this funding were not leveraged, we probably couldn't expect to build more than 20 or 25 units with it. We'd like to have this funding highly leveraged so that we can build closer to 75 to 100, depending on how much leverage folks apply with. Um, and yeah, that's essentially the allocation plan as it's detailed and published. There's a lot more detail in terms of the analysis, but the primary purpose of this is really to collect public input. So we'll open it up now, and I will, before actually we go to public input, invite Yusuf to provide any additional comments or framing as you see fit, Yusuf.
Thanks, Noel. I don't really have many comments at this point. I just appreciate CDA and its partnership in this effort to address the needs of the most vulnerable. These resources will go a long way in supporting some of the gaps that have been long identified here in the community. And so we look forward to the partnership with the community pursuant to filling that gap and making sure that this is an ability for us in a time to use resources that are unprecedented to leverage for a long-term impact within our region. Thanks again.
Thanks, Yusuf. And yeah, with that, let's turn to public comments. Tommy Nagel on our team is taking notes on all of this, and all comments will be shared with HUD. Tommy, perhaps you can facilitate a little bit and just select who folks for public comment.
Hi all, Tom Nagel here. I'm the Public Information Officer here at CDA. We also have Mike from STL TV who's going to help us facilitate. I see a hand raised from James Roos, so I'm going to unmute and have him talk.
Good morning.
Hey, Jim.
Hi. Good morning, Noel and Tom. I appreciate several of your comments. No preconception of what might be funded. You know, we've been pushing for something called abbreviated selective rehab. I noticed that during the last 4 years, as I attempted to revive this approach. By the way, the approach used to be just 3 things: nonprofit ownership, help with financing, and just a moment, selective rehab. As I met people with other nonprofits, I realized that there were 2 other ingredients that were essential. Skilled, compassionate property management. That's something I had done really all my life for 45 years, at least adult life. And I call it neighborhood greening. That's taking care of the neglected properties or areas across the alley, in the street, next door, private or publicly owned. So there's 5 parts to the selective rehab that we talk about. Also, we Sanctuary in the Ordinary, strive to repair and retain the units and then make them also to be a model for other nonprofits, I should say, not just we doing it ourselves, but we then make them available to just a moment. Entities like Criminal Justice Ministry, St. Patrick's, Horizon, Gateway 180. So we consider ourselves and our approach to be the method that repairs and makes available units at the least cost. And we don't ourselves furnish the services, but we make those units available. And if, maybe that's my comment. So I appreciate your willingness to consider that. I know I've been trying to get a meeting with you. I see you smile a little bit. So those are my comments. Thanks for having this session this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should find time to connect. But generally speaking, I'll comment on selective rehab and minor rehab as an approach. And I do think it's a great way to get increased bang for your buck. I'll be transparent that I don't think it's a great fit for these HOME-ARP funds. And that's simply because HOME-ARP is subject to all the home requirements in terms of regulatory compliance. And that includes environmental review, Section 106 review, Section 3 compliance, lead-based paint remediation, radon mitigation, Energy Star standard, and for larger projects, Davis-Bacon. And so the issue becomes for the smaller grants that the compliance costs eat up a larger and larger percentage of the grant. I do think that they are a very good fit. More minor rehab projects will be a good fit. CDA was awarded $7.5 million for affordable housing production of SLRF dollars, state and local fiscal relief funds, and we do anticipate making those available to a broad spectrum of rehab projects, ranging from selective and minor rehab to full and complete gut rehabs. And so we do anticipate making some funding available for that approach, which we do believe has a lot of promise in terms of bang for the buck, but it's just not the best fit for these funds, which really, just given the compliance requirements associated with it, we'd prefer to allocate to a smaller portfolio of major projects. Again, perhaps a larger multifamily, tiny home and scattered site, or a couple scattered site projects. It'll all depend on the application, but just the project ought to be of a certain scale to really make all the regulatory compliance worth it.
Based on what you said, I agree with you. You know, Bill Rocha has told me that in the past. I really was, how would you call it, almost overwhelmed with the desire to have the Affordable Housing Commission use $2 million of its new money for this current year's projects for the selective rehab, because they're not faced with the same regulations that you are. But I was unable to enlist your support on that, or theirs, or the mayor's. At least to my knowledge, I wasn't able to, or we weren't able to. So we'll have to look for other sources or another year. But thanks for your really candid comments, because I don't have any doubt that what you said, if that's where the money, if that's how the money is used, limited, there's no, I have no, not quarrel, but no disagreement with your statement. And I'm disappointed that it is not more flexible, and that we couldn't have gotten the Affordable Housing Commission to use some of its very flexible money for this approach in this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person to have their hand raised is Sherry Tillis. So I will unmute her. See if I can figure it out.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, I've been listening in. I haven't had an opportunity to read the entire allocation plan, but this snow day is definitely giving me that opportunity. I was just wondering if our organization would be able to apply to use the funds to allocate stipends and or funding to help pay for our participants to get into affordable housing. We have a self-sufficiency model in that we have fathers, mothers, and youth who enroll in services to receive responsible fatherhood, motherhood, employment placement, and credentialing training. And then our final step is 1 year of follow-up and case management with those individuals to make sure that they do have adequate housing and the support services to assure that they can maintain their own lifestyle. And so I was just wondering if we would be a good fit for this application, and whether that would be considered some type of, I don't know, capacity building, and or would it be considered maybe just funding to assist with housing stability?
I don't want to answer that question with 100% certainty until I understand essentially the scope of services a little bit more. But what I would say is that if it is eligible, it would probably be under the supportive services category. And what I would encourage you to do is to apply, partner with someone who's applying to develop the affordable housing, and essentially join their application as a co-applicant and say, we want to be funded to provide the following supportive services in terms of case management and other services to X number of residents of this permanent supportive housing development. So you all would essentially, and again, I would have to review the services more deeply, but supportive services in general are eligible uses. But details matter in terms of what is considered an eligible public service.
Okay, thank you very much.
It looks like the next person to raise their hand was Andre Logan, so I'm gonna let them talk now.
Good morning. Thank you. Can
Good
you hear
morning.
me okay?
Yes.
I was wondering, I know you said the NOFA was coming out. So if you got a nonprofit, say partnering with another nonprofit that had an affordable housing project in place that say didn't get funded by MHDC this last round, how would we, is there a place where we could be able to meet with someone and go over our project and see what would be the best way to apply for the funds?
Yes, CDA staff would be happy to meet with you. Our Director of Housing is Bill Rata, and this is not the only affordable housing funds that the city has available. And so we'd love to hear about your project and point you in the right direction in terms of which funds might be the best fit. I'll note actually, just in terms of timing, that this NOFA, we won't be able to issue it until HUD approves our allocation plan. So that's likely a few months out, if not longer. But there may be other SLRF, ARPA funded, state and local fiscal relief funded housing funds available from CDA even sooner. And those would be more flexible than these funds. So we'll be doing a couple different rounds.
So how would I contact Bill?
I'll drop his contact info in the chat, and I'll also drop my own and feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, it looks like Michael Burns is the next person, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn them on. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, I'm Michael Burns with Northside Community Housing, and I think that in all transparency, I need to point out that I'm a board member of the St. Louis City COC. I just wanted to make it known that I feel like I have read the allocation plan, and I think that it is a good plan. I just want to point out one thing in particular, but I think that it's being moved in the right direction. Just to even place something in there like the opportunity to have a master lease makes this process for at-risk populations so much easier, because you're alleviating problems of a landlord having to qualify somebody, and you're also alleviating a burden for the landlord, because the fact that they know upfront that their monies are going to be paid on a timely basis. So I just wanted to point out that as one of the examples of why I think that this particular allocation plan will help to assist to get people off the street much faster than some of the things that I've seen taking place in prior years. And I want to compliment the committees that have worked on this, compliment CDA, Yusuf, for all the hard work that they've been doing to get us to this point, because I really believe we're going in the right direction this time. That's all I can say.
Thank you, sir, for that comment. And I'll note that we actually met with HUD yesterday because we wanted guidance as to whether master leases were an eligible use of these funds. They weren't explicitly enumerated, but when we connected with HUD and laid out what we were interested in funding, they said, yes, absolutely. And so they agree it's the best practice, and it's good to hear that it sounds like that'll work for practitioners as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Looks like Kendra Jones is next. I will unmute them.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First, thanks everyone for taking the time to, go over this material this morning. I know that it was mentioned in terms of these funds being heavily leveraged and wanted to ask if there was any particular percentage or more so a threshold that you all found was most successful in terms of building new construction affordable housing as a percentage, with funds versus overall development costs.
It's a great question. I'll say that traditionally and typically, CDA, we fund two different types of projects. Essentially, we fund single family for sale homes, and we fund large multifamily rental projects. And typically, we make up about 50% of the capital stack around for the single family homes, which are smaller dollar amounts. And then we take up typically almost never more than 10% of the capital stack of the larger multifamily developments, which are typically highly leveraged with LIHTC and other MHDC and federal sources. What we're looking at with these funds is because they are pretty substantial. We're open to making larger awards than usual, again, depending on how many folks apply and essentially the degree of need and how we can leverage them for maximum effect. So what we wrote into the allocation plan is essentially assuming that that these funds would represent about 25%, 20 to 25% of the capital stack of a given project. So going above our traditional of threshold of 10% or so, but still a minority of the funds, and certainly looking for additional leverage. But I should
Okay,
also,
great.
yeah, and I should also note that leverage is one of many factors that will be part of the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria, and they haven't been finalized yet, those will be in the NOFA, as well a variety of additional details on eligible uses. This is our allocation plan, so it comes before we get into that level of detail. But evaluation criteria include the applicant qualifications and experience, both with housing development and serving those qualifying populations, the work plan itself, and kind of feasibility in terms of whether it's a reasonable budget, reasonable cash flow and reserve assumptions. There's a strong management plan. There's a strong maintenance plan. There's a strong supportive service plan, full ADA compliance and compliance and comfort with all the regulatory requirements. We'd love to see some larger bedroom, some higher bedroom counts for larger families, and then a variety of other more detailed factors. Again, just trying to assess the viability, feasibility, and impact of the proposed project.
Understood. Thanks for the answer.
I do not see at this time any new hands raised or any other new questions.
It looks like there's a question in the chat potentially. Oh, here I see it.
Okay, yeah. Can
Our
you find it?
Our proposals for this funding require to include development of affordable rental housing units, or will applications for supportive services alone also be considered? At this point, we want any supportive services or rental assistance provided, funded by the HOME-ARP funds to be project-based, essentially to be focused on the project. And so currently what is proposed in this allocation plan is that standalone applications for supportive service funding would not be eligible. It would need to be a supportive service application in partnership with a housing production allocation. And let me note, actually, this is really important, that these funds can be spent through 2030. And so that long lead time essentially allows us to both build the housing and then fund those supportive services a few years out once the housing comes online. But That's where we're at today, because again, we want to concentrate the impact of these funds, and we believe that there are other funding opportunities available for other types of supportive services, both through CDA, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and DHS, among others. But welcome public input, and this is an opportunity to sort of explore that further, and we welcome public input.
Was adding some doors on some of the closet things that we had.
I think we have some more hands, Tommy, if I'm not mistaken.
I see. Trying to figure this out. Pardon me. See, Greg Vatterott. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I was just calling to, inquiring about the timing of the proposed NOFA, when you think it will be released?
It really depends on a couple things. It depends on when HUD approves, and it also depends on how quickly we move to deploy other affordable housing funding sources, such as the state and local fiscal relief funds, where CDA has been awarded $7.5 million to deploy, and we're going to move forward in putting out that NOFA sooner rather than later, and sooner certainly than this NOFA, because that NOFA doesn't require HUD or Treasury approval, doesn't require this citizen participation process, although we will make sure that the funding that we award is community driven. And so the kind of order of operations will be the $7.5 million in SLRF housing production funds will go out first, hopefully in the coming month or so, if not sooner. And the HOME-ARP NOFA will go out once HUD approves our allocation plan, and then we'll also want to see essentially the degree of responses to our SLRF funds and our capacity to administer those in terms of just timing when this next round will move forward.
Okay, great. And I assume that the two NOFAs aren't stackable or combinable?
It's not advisable to combine them, because one of the great things about SLRF funds is the reduced regulatory compliance, and then as soon as you stack it with these HOME-ARP funds, you lose that benefit on your project. And so it's certainly our preference not to stack it. I'm not going to say it could never be stacked, because theoretically it could be. It would just then tie the ARPA funds to those home regulatory requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, can you, I'm having difficulty seeing the whole chat. Can you please unmute Andre or read the question?
Okay,
Oh,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Yes.
and I just figured out how to see the chat. So Andre, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I
Thanks.
was just trying to get some information that you guys say you was putting in the chat. And when I went to it, it said the chat was disabled.
Oh, got it. So here's what happened. I put that into the chat for host and panelists, not for everyone. So let me try this again. And if not, you can also look at your screen and you can see our emails there.
Okay. And what was the other gentleman, Bill's full name?
Bill
Did you-
Rata.
Ruffle?
No, Rata. That's Rataj.
Thank you.
You can see our email addresses again on the screen and hopefully in your chat.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All righty. I think everyone with their hands raised already had an opportunity to ask their question. Um, so with that will bring this public hearing to a conclusion unless there's any final comments.
I did have an additional, just a clarifying question. When you talked about having until 2030 to spend the funds, can you expound on that? Is that 2030 we have post award, or is that you all's allotment of funds you have until 2032 award?
So we would like to get these funds awarded uh, as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of 2023 or early 2024. And there's also a question there in terms of just how it interacts with the LIHTC cycle as well, in terms of timing that we'll consider. But no, we want to get these funds fully awarded by the end of 23 or early 24. Then the subrecipients of funds, which would be the affordable housing developer, the supportive services providers, et cetera, would have until 2030 to expend the funds. To be clear, CDA, for those who haven't worked with us before, especially with HUD funding, we operate on a reimbursement basis. So the essential process and flow, and it's something we're exploring changing for ARPA funds, but the essential process and flow for these HOME-ARP funds is we issue the NOFA, we make awards, we enter into contract, conduct all the required compliance, and then recipients of funds submit pay requests. So once you incur the cost and make the expenditure, you submit that pay request to CDA, and those incurred costs have to be incurred before 2030 or by 2030. Does that answer
Okay,
your
thank you.
question?
Yes, it did.
Great. Great. Well, thank you all for the public comment, and thank you to everyone who contributed to this allocation plan and to the consultations. We appreciate it. We hear everyone's comments and look forward to getting these funds out into the community.